The following telephone recordings are from March 1977. This narration is being done in 2009. On the road trip from Greenville, North Carolina to Atlanta, which I had planned to touch as many independents as possible, Asheboro just had to be in there because I'd called it from New York and the area had a lot of Jane Barbie recordings and it just sounded like a cool, interesting independent. Turned out to be so, especially since they put the coin phones in the Pentaconta office, 625. They could have put them in 629, the step. One thing you'll hear through this entire recording is the sound of the first digit of telephone numbers that other customers are dialing bleeding through the dial tone, like this. You hear the first digit, and then you don't hear anything else because it breaks the dial tone for them, and then we're no longer connected together via the dial tone. On the first call, I let the dial tone time out. It goes for 25 seconds and then ends up giving us another dial tone, actually, just resetting. There's a touch tone near the beginning, another one near the end. There's another touch tone on the second dial tone shortly after it starts. And then when I dial 0 for operator, there's even a touch tone bleeding through on the dial tone during the time it's being used to tell the operator I'm at a coin phone. So anyway, here's leaving the phone off the hook, having the dial tone time out to another dial tone, just resetting, and then dialing 0, and you keep hearing touch tones, including through the tone the operator gets. Now continuing the narration 5.5 years later, this is Evan Doorbell 6.0. Hello. 5 years ago when I started this, I thought it would be a good idea to take what we've just heard and filter out the two tones of the dial tone. That'll let us hear people's first digit coming in on the dial tone. So you'll hear several customers starting to dial a number. We heard a lot of customers coming in. Now, the Pentaconta switch is made by ITT. It's a crossbar switch, and with Penta in the name, it's pretty clear they're thinking about imitating Crossbar 5. Well, let's just see how much it sounds like a Crossbar 5. Here's a call to the local time number, an intra-office call.
First National Bank has convenient locations throughout Randolph County. Time 12:03. Temperature 67.
Now, for just a moment, let's go to Crossbar 5 Heaven, Long Island, and hear the real McCoy. Wow, let me turn up the sensitivity.
Hello? 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 It's coming from 293. Hello? Good Goodbye.
Now, without slowing down and analyzing for a year, let me mention that really, the only way in which it sounds like Crossbar 5 is this. That sound of connecting. It's associated with your line being taken off the originating register and put on an actual trunk. And of course, as we'll see in Pentaconta, it's not just a register, it's a register sender. But other than that noise, this is not at all like Crossbar 5. Unlike Crossbar 5, this is quiet while you're dialing. The ring is very independent and kind of sterile sounding compared to a bell system ring. And the answer supervision within the same entity. On a Crossbar 5, it's very single click for off hook and on hook. But here at this Pentaconta, it's a very fast double tick. But you know, it has to be that way in Pentaconta, because in Pentaconta, local calls, when they answer, reverse your line polarity. That's something we always liked, because we could build devices to detect it and stuff. The Bell System Crossbar and panel offices never did that. Pentaconta does, and that's why the answer supervision within the same switch is fast double clicks. So the only way Pentaconta really sounds like Crossbar 5 is versus very close. And just to be complete, Crossbar 5 has a variant on that sound. Tick-a-clunk versus ka-clunk. But the Pentaconta, as far as we know, always just goes tick-a-clunk in its own way. Boy, that's detailed on the sound enough, isn't it?
Am I supposed to stand up and cheer?
Right. Anyway, staying with Crossbar 5 for a minute, here's a 1977 recording from my West 73rd Street Crossbar 5 calling one of the panels in the same building, Endicott 2. The reason I want to show you this is it illustrates the main noticeable difference from a phone freak perspective between a Crossbar 5 and a Pentaconta. Crossbar 5s always do this when you dial the last digit of the phone number, and that sound means you're being taken off the originating register, that's the thing that gives you the dial tone and stores your digits, and put on an outgoing trunk. Now, if it is necessary for the Crossbar 5 to outpulse to another office to tell it what number you want, the outpulsing will be going on right after the, and you'll hear primarily silence during that time. When the outpulsing is done, you'll hear, and then you will be cut through to the outgoing trunk. So when you dial the last digit, you are taken off the originating register, like that. Now we're on the trunk, but there's a sender sending the number we want, and then no more sender. We're on the trunk directly, and there was all sorts of clicky, pulsy stuff going on in that silence between the and the. That's the Crossbar 5 way of doing things. And by the way, ringing into a busy signal, well, that's the panel way of doing things. We're calling a panel in this example. Here's another call to the panel.
Hello. This call is being answered by an electronic answering system because it cannot be answered personally at this time. Your call will be returned shortly if you will leave your name and number after you hear the beep sound. Remember, don't start talking until you hear the beep.
Ah, the 1970s. Isn't it amazing that answering machines were so relatively uncommon, though not unheard of, that they felt it necessary to coach people? Remember, do not start talking until you hear the beep.
Now wait for the tone. Please do not begin speaking until you hear the tone, like I am in the 3rd grade.
Do you know that in the 70s, almost everybody did not have an answering machine and no voicemail? The phone just rang unanswered when you weren't home, and somehow we survived. We had no email, no text messaging. Even to me, when I look back, it kind of doesn't compute. Oh, and we didn't do that either, compute. Anyway, back to the subject of how Pentaconta differs from Western Electric's Crossbar 5. I grew up with Crossbar 5. I'm used to hearing tick-a-clunk at the end of the number I dial, no matter what, local, long distance, everything. Now, Pentaconta goes tick-a-clunk on every call that it connects, but not always at the end of the number you dial. In fact, it's kind of strange for somebody like me to hear this, because it's as if everything has been sort of turned upside down. Here's a call from the 625 Pentaconta switch to the 629 step switch in the same building. For this call, the Pentaconta has to outpulse to the step. Here you can see the main difference. On Crossbar 5, the originating register just gets the number you're calling. And once that's done, tick-a-clunk, you're put on the trunk. The sender, to let the called office know what you want, is a separate item that's brought in temporarily just to do the sending. But in Pentaconta, the register and the sender are in one unit. So when you get a dial tone, you're put on the originating register sender, you dial your number. When you dial the last digit, instead of being taken off this piece of equipment, you stay on it, and in some way, the connection is made through the Crossbar network to the outgoing trunk. It seems to do it all at once. There's no pulsing or long pauses, so my guess is they have a device similar to Western Electric's marker, making the connection through the Crossbar network. Now that the connection is made, the register sender, which we're still on, dials onto the trunk. Unlike number 5 Crossbar, the outpulsing is very audible, and we can even hear noises from the trunk underneath, the step responding. Now that the dialing is complete, you're taken off this device and put on the outgoing trunk directly. So the tick-a-clunk comes at the end. The first impression of a phone freak will be that this is sort of a cross between number 1 and number 5 Crossbar, because number 1 Crossbar, like Pentaconta, has the register and sender functions combined in the same unit, and you stay on it from the start of dial tone to the end of outpulsing. But Crossbar 1 doesn't go, it goes. And at the risk of a major digression, let me mention that number 1 Crossbar doesn't produce an interruption in your DC line power when you're taken off the register and put on the outgoing trunk. So this won't flash a light or click a relay or anything. That is not the case for panel, Crossbar 5, number 1 ESS, or Pentaconta, which I need to get back to. Let's dial another local call that goes out of 625 so we can hear it put the tick-a-clunk at the end of the outpulsing again. 672 is some sort of crossbar switch. I don't know the type. It's not the same as Pentaconta. There is an ITT Metaconta switch, which I know nothing about, but that's just a guess. Here's a call to 672. The crossbar switch we're calling from will dial this directly into the 672 switch, waiting for a flash handshake before it starts dialing. This call should be fun to analyze. We get a dial tone and we dial all 7 digits of the number. First, we hear 3 clicks associated with our getting the 672 trunk. There. Next, 672 gives us a flash handshake. We have to wait for the handshake before we begin dialing, because 672 is not a step. It's probably a crossbar switch and it needs to attach an incoming register before it can receive digits. That's the handshake. Now the register sender here can dial. And when it's done, now we're completely on the outgoing trunk, and there's a significant delay before that happened. Not that long, but the unedited call definitely indicates a long delay for 672 to process the number. Look how long it takes from the tick-a-clunk, which is already after the end of the last digit, to 672's first click indicating it's making the connection. It's a full second from the last pulse of the last digit to 672 making the connection. Pretty slow for a crossbar office. Here's a call to an intercept number in 672. It's worth listening to the sound that it makes just before it starts to go into the ring and the recording, but also on the dial tone here, you can hear 2 dimes going in from a coin phone pretty clearly.
Sorry, the number you've reached is not in service at this time. If you need assistance, please hang up and dial your directory assistance operator. This is a recording in Asheboro, North Carolina. I'm sorry, the number you've reached is not in service at this time. If you need
Are they using an answering machine instead of a regular intercept announcing machine?
This is a recording in Asheboro, North Carolina.
I think so. You know, that actually did have, shall we say, a not very professional, poorly recorded Jane Barbie recording on it the first time I heard it.
I'm out, and if you want to leave a message, wait for the tone.
No, that is, right, no, I was just kidding. That was edited from a casual conversation. Did not happen. But what was on there was a poor quality copy of the vacant code recording that used to be here when we dial 119.
I'm sorry, the number you have reached is not in service at this time. If you need assistance, please hang up and dial your directory assistance operator. This is a recording in Asheboro, North Carolina.
The 11X codes are built out in this crossbar office. 113 actually works for directory assistance. But of course, the first vacant code I tried was 311. As it turns out, 311 was just plain not wired, and this shows what a Pentaconta can do when they don't bother to wire a code correctly. So that's a code that hasn't been wired, and it just ends up timing out to a reorder. Now, for what it's worth, a Long Island Crossbar 5 would be different. Any code not wired would simply terminate on 7 digits to this sound. In the downstate New York area, that was used for partial dial, but unwired codes went there too. Dialing long distance is not permitted from coin phones here. It would be interesting to see how long-distance calls went through from home phones. In the local network, this office never MFs. I wonder if it ends up dial pulsing on 1+ calls from home phones. I cannot tell, but here's what happens when you dial 1+ from this coin phone. A regular old busy signal doesn't seem like a good idea as a toll restriction indicator. They actually have a signal here that would work better because at least it would tell the customer that something was wrong, rather than making them think their party is actually busy. Now, for years, we had heard the term howler applied to the receiver off hook tone, this. We never quite understood why. It doesn't howl, maybe it barks, I don't know. But here in Asheboro, as well as I think, if my memory is right, in like 1971 in Durham, North Carolina, I did hear something that actually fits that name. Here's what happened one time when I left my phone off the hook here. Durham was the General Telephone Company with 102 directors and semi-dial tone first connected to AE step. I really think they had that tone, but by the time I got to record anything at all, it was 1975, and their permanent signal was more conventional, except for one thing.
Delay too long in dialing the number. Please hang up and redial.
Low tone before the recording. That's unique, I think. That isn't. Anyway, back to Asheboro. Let's try dialing star and pound on a dial tone, see what it does. It ignores those, at least on the dial tone. Let's try dialing 1 first, which will break dial tone, and see if it ignores it after that. Yeah, that's going to vacant code intercept. So I dialed 1 and then 3 stars. Nothing happened. Then I dialed 1 and it went to vacant code intercept. So it ignores the stars after the digit 1. But if you dial 2 and then star, that completed to the real reorder tone. Now on Crossbar 5, of course, star and pound will give you reorder, but from the originating register. In other words, it doesn't go tick-a-clunk, it just comes on, and then later times out. On Crossbar 5, if you dial your own number, you get a busy signal. Here's dialing my own number here. Alrighty, here's a 625 vacant number.
I'm sorry, the number you have reached is not in service at this time. If you need assistance, please hang up and dial your directory assistance operator. This is a recording in Asheboro, North Carolina.
Vacant code and vacant number have the same recording. For directory assistance, the code is 113, and this is reached through a special trunk to the 629 step, which apparently is different from the trunk group used for calling 629 telephone numbers. When we dial 113, this Pentaconta picks up that special trunk to 629 and dials 13. Interesting how the timbre of the ring kept changing. That has to do with some activity in the office, maybe having to do with people's phones ringing. That, after all, is the power signal that's used to ring the phone bells. It was deliberately separated in this type of a ring machine from the audible ringtone, which is this. That's the 629 audible ring, and the power ring is separate, but for some reason the phone companies for directory assistance and repair service will very often use the power ringtone as the audible tone. I don't know why.
Operator 23, your number, please.
625-9024.
Can I help you?
Number for time of day in Asheboro.
Thank you. 625-1340.
Thank you.
Well, we've heard a lot of the difference between Pentaconta and Crossbar 5, but we haven't even gotten into the tributaries yet. It's kind of an interesting little network, as you'll see in the next segment.